You enter the mouth of an ominous cave.
The Force calls out to you.
You see a golden treasure chest glistening with jewels.
What do you do?
Welcome back to episode 3. My name is Remus Maximus.
This is J. Lovecraft.
I'm your Star Queen.
This is the Mad Doctor.
And we are bringing you some wonderful epic stories from our past DMing, RPGs, and other just fun little stories that we've come across. While we get into this, why don't we just go ahead and set the mood? Hey, Doc, can you light that fire?
Absolutely.
Ah, that's perfect. Now, where was I? Oh yeah, we were going to tell some stories. So why don't we go ahead and start from basically the beginning? Lovecraft, why don't you educate us on some fun DMing stuff from back in the day?
Back in the day, wow. I don't have a time machine, but I'll see what I can do. Yes, I've been DMing for 40 years. 40, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, that's kind of scary enough. But I do get out, like I said before. For me, role-playing games is not just something you just grab off the shelf and then you read the book and then you figure out, okay, how am I going to run this game? No. There's a story behind it. And it's always the characters that always runs the stories. You give out a basic plot line, something that's totally, absolutely basic that everyone could understand, something that hits the basic thought patterns of that individual.
Mm-hmm.
And then afterwards, the characters just run with it. And then after a while, you just give them another idea and see how the characters would react.
Mm-hmm.
It could be from an NPC, it could be from a monster, it could be another person that just joined the group in real life that you would happen to know. And you would actually think in the back of your mind, okay, I'm an entertainer, I'm also a judge, and I'm also something of a friend of theirs.
Mm-hmm.
And you always have the simple idea in the back of your mind, okay, I'm going to conduct a chapter. And always with chapters, you always think, what can I do with these characters? What can I slide them into a certain dungeon or a certain treasure they have to find?
What kind of hellhole can you actually put them in?
Fill in the blank.
Yeah, it's pretty
Fill in
much,
the blank.
it's an endless possibility. And I think that's the beauty of when it comes down to DMing is I think every single one of us at this table has a different style
Oh, yeah.
of DMing.
For sure.
Yeah,
Very much
and
so.
it all had to come from the beginning when
Well-
Gary Gygax started it and when we moved to different styles of RPGs and role-playing games.
Well, first of all, there is no such thing as one set way to play any role-playing game. I don't care if it's Dungeons and Dragons, I don't care if it's Star Wars or Star Trek or even simply Vampire the Masquerade. There is no one set way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
The only way to do it is to simply read it, create a character from it that is an extension of you.
That's a good point.
Okay. Now, my personal take, like Michael from Vampire the Masquerade, he's been kicking around since 1991.
Very long time.
And right now, my goal as a storyteller within Vampire the Masquerade is to retire him. And that's the whole MO of why he established this Camarilla in a small particular city in the first place, and have the characters prove their worth to be the next prince.
In order to take over the crown, essentially.
Yeah. And if one of them deems himself or herself worthy, hey, guess what? The crown's yours.
Mhm.
I can retire happy. This is the whole premise of the whole game for me.
Which is, from what I understand, that's a little bit backwards for Vampire, isn't it? Because isn't the way it normally work, someone does something, they get in trouble, a plot thickens, and then there's murder, and normally the prince's corpse is on the floor before he dissolves into ash, is from what I understand.
That's the trick.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to be the guy who has to do the normal thing. I don't like the normal. it has to be done something completely different.
Well, and for those that aren't actually familiar what he's talking about, so this is a live-action role-play called Vampire the Masquerade.
Well, correction, it is Vampire the Masquerade, however, in technicality terms, this is Mind's Eye Theatre.
Correct.
I don't want Vampire the Masquerade fans blowing up our email correcting us. That is what this is. It's Mind's Eye.
And what is the difference between the two?
Okay, Mind's Eye Theater, Vampire the Masquerade are somewhat two different scenarios. In live-action role-playing, or LARP, the system is referred to as Mind's Eye Theater, but the setting is Vampire the Masquerade.
Where Vampire the Masquerade is typically a normal sit-down, roll-up-a-character type of game.
Correct.
Yeah, you typically used with like dice and stuff, correct? Because
Correct,
there's
yes.
Blood value and that kind of stuff, right?
There is not only blood value, but also rolling for skills, rolling for traits, spending willpower in order to maintain your existence, and especially trying to prevent frenzying, if you will.
From what I understand, they also have 2 different sheets, if I'm correct.
For some various editions, there are.
Okay.
During the 20th anniversary edition, when Onyx Path relaunched Vampire the Masquerade, they tried to amalgamate both, and it was somewhat successful. And you could tell within the latest incarnation with Mind's Eye Theater, and it's a very well done system. The character sheets look practically the same, and that later changed into the 5th edition, maybe around 2014.
Okay. So it's still relatively new, 2014 to 2021 for gaming stuff.
Yeah, it's relatively new. But yet, there are those who feel 5th edition is not Vampire the Masquerade. It's not how it's supposed to have been done, especially with the settings. You have clans that are in, some clans that are not, and it all depends on the individual perspective of how the game should be done.
That's interesting.
Well, that's just like regular D&D as well. There's the age-old argument of 3.5 versus 5e versus Pathfinder.
Oh, yeah.
And now Starfinder.
If you play Pathfinder, I love Pathfinder. I love all D&D. Pathfinder for me is a little bit more blah. I don't feel like you get to be as experimental with Pathfinder like you do 5e, or personally I started back in 3e, and that was back when the Paladin was broken, and I mean just broken.
Yeah.
Then I went to 4e, and then 5e came out, and I honestly have to say that 5e is probably the single most balanced version of D&D that's ever come out.
Which I think was the point, right? Because they understood the issues that 3.5 had.
For some, it was considered overpowered, even to the point where if you made your 20th level character using various classes and using only a single race, you could wind up being an accidental god without even knowing it.
Speaking of which, you were talking about multi-classing, as it's called. And
Oh, yeah.
I actually had, speaking on this, I had a wood elf that started out as my favorite class in D&D, a ranger. And you three have got to see my ranger. We've played, and I'm really great as him, but I ended up multi-classing into 3 other classes: barbarian, fighter, and a monk.
Oh, is this Adrian?
No, Adrian was a pure ranger.
Okay,
No other
I
class
thought so.
but pure ranger. This was one I did about 6 years ago.
Okay, so not Theros.
No, not
Okay.
Theros.
Different one.
Yes, I did this about 6 years ago, and I wasn't the DM at the time, but my buddy that was DMing, he come to me, he goes, "You just can't play this character anymore." I said, "Why?" He goes, "Dude, you're hitting for over 200 damage in one turn because the monk's abilities, the hunter's mark, and all this." He's like, "You're rolling handfuls of dice." I said, "It's not my fault. I know how to play my characters."
Well,
Yeah.
the problem with that is it depends also on the DM himself.
That's true. There are some things that you can put into place, and even I've had to do as a DM when I put in a weapon specifically for a story point. It was fairly overpowered as it was a homebrew weapon. However, I quickly realized the player who had this weapon was abusing it so hard that when that player left the game, I decided no one gets this weapon now. It is too overpowered, even in players' hands who are less wild cards. I don't want this weapon in my game.
I absolutely agree with you, Star Queen, is that it's up to the DM to put those restrictions. I myself, I allow multi-classing, but you're only allowed to have 2 classes. And when I DM, your original, and then you have to come verify it through me. I want to put these points into, about a year ago, or no, 2 years ago, I ran a D&D session for my wife and her brother-in-law, or her brothers and her sister. They all come to me, each one every night. Did we level up? Yeah, it was milestone level up. So they leveled up every so often. My brother-in-law came to me and said, hey, I want to multi-class. I was like, all right, but I want you to know you only get one other class. You get your primary and then you get this one. It took him 2 weeks to sit down and, because I make people, when they multi-class, if you don't have the right attribute points,
Correct.
you don't get that class.
Yeah.
It's not like on D&D. It's like on D&D Beyond. If you try to multi-class in that, it'll bring up a list and it'll say, well, these, with what your attributes are, this is what you get to multi-class into. I've gotten so much gripe over that because people are like, well, why can't we just multi-class into whatever we want? Because I've been playing this forever. I know how you can break the game. I'm not letting you destroy my story because you want to be something that's OP.
Yeah, and that's something that actually goes into like Star Wars, for instance, in Force and Destiny. When that book came out, a lot of the Force users ended up being kind of a problem because they were able to level up faster than everyone else.
Yeah.
And that actually goes back to like the old days of like Star Wars Galaxies and things like that. It was damn near impossible towards the end to basically become a Jedi because they just were OP.
And if you've seen a Jedi, you pretty much stayed the hell away from him, or you made him your best friend.
Yeah, there was no like in between. It was either 0 to 60, and that's it. But when it comes to like my game for the one that I'm running in Star Wars, is the Jedi classes are allowed, but I am making them specifically earn more
Right.
to make that character actually worthwhile. Smugglers and stuff, they get away with a few other little things here and there, but they don't get as much, like, I guess, XP into it. I let them get away with a little bit more things cinematically and things like that, but when it comes to like milestone upgrades or XPs given and things like that, rewards, it's dictated by the cinema that comes from their interactions and things like that.
Which that's actually something very interesting in a Transformers game that I'm about to run. In that game, because of the fact that you are giant robots and how the system is designed, you cannot multi-class at all. It's just not an option. You can change your class midway during the game. The only way that can happen, though, is if you make a deal with Unicron and you get reformatted. So at that point, you're not even your own character anymore. You're working for Unicron, and he can change you into whatever. So if I need you to be a certain thing, then my power as a DM as Unicron would be, okay, this. Now, granted, I would probably sit down with that player ahead of time and discuss, what do you want to be? What do you want to look like? Do you have an idea for like an alt mode? And then in the game, we would reveal it together. However, I just thought that was really interesting, considering, like you said, with Star Wars, it's more of a cinematic thing as opposed to a technical thing in regular D&D.
I'd like to pose a question to all my co-hosts here.
Sure.
I know you've dealt with it before, Reedimus. Have any of you dealt with a situation where a player wants to kill off a character to bring in a new character?
Yeah, I mean, multiple times.
That has happened, but it happens rarely. Simply because of the fact that when you have a player who's not happy with the character that they have, it says to me this character is not complete, that this character is not the vision in which the player is. That rarely does happen. And this is why I always make the caveat before we ever roleplay. Are you sure you not missing anything? Are you sure, is there something you want to add? Something like into your backstory, something you want to take away, to make sure that the player character, if not the player himself, would feel more comfortable playing that character.
Exactly, because, when it comes down to like permadeath,
Yeah.
in role-playing games, that's it. I mean, once that character's extinguished, it's done.
Yeah.
You don't get him back.
Yeah.
Well, and, Reedimus, you were talking about your Star Wars you run, us three playing it, and I had a character that we sat and discussed, and I said, I don't want to play him anymore. And you looked right at me and said, all right, but listen, this is it. I don't. If later down the road you're like, you know what, I think I want to. You know, you need to decide right now. I remember we had that talk, and yeah, and I'm with you on that. I'm a permadeath DM. If your character dies later down the road, they don't get to wish you back.
Yeah,
You're done.
And granted, again, just from my DM thing, I will give you the type of death you want or the send-off you want. And
Yes,
again,
you will.
it's one of those things that if you're a martyr character, if you're a a non-sacrifice, but like in this situation, you've decided to basically not be an asshole, and you're like, all right, well, I guess is my last dying breath. I'm going to try to save my comrades. I'll give it to you, but again, it's another thing. You have to earn that.
Right.
I actually had an interesting situation where I, as a player, was asked to basically undo the permadeath of a character before it even happened. This was in another game. A player wanted to kill off their character for the sake of the story to save the universe, multiverse, whatever. And as my character, they wanted me to actually go in and undo that. And when I told them no, they kind of oddly looked at me funny, as if this was somehow something they shouldn't bring up with the DM. Like at that point, I just kept on saying, talk to the DM, talk to the DM, talk to the DM. They wouldn't. They wanted me as a player to go find their character in the afterlife to bring them back, because they didn't want to roll another character, but they wanted to change their character at the same time.
That's odd.
It was very odd.
So I got a story I'd like to share.
Yes.
You did a last episode. You did an interview with the Gamers Cave owners. One of the Gamers Cave owners, Brandon, he ran a campaign himself, and I played 2 characters in that campaign, 2 different, completely like opposite spectrum characters. My first one was a mage, and I was one of the more experienced players at the table, so I kind of tried to flex a little bit and show off. And Brandon, he slapped me down hard for it. Like, I was like, yeah, so what had happened is I jumped off this boat we were on, used a cone of cold to freeze the water in front of me to just kind of like slide around on it.
Yeah.
He loved that. He's like, that's a great idea. Like he was like, that's awesome. That's a great idea. That's a great use of magic. You know, it's not attacking. It's something different.
It's manipulating the environment.
And which is exactly what mages in D&D do. They
Yeah.
manipulate the environment or the cosmos. So I make a little patch of ice out there. And he's like, yeah, you see the shark fin? I was like, oh, we're fighting a shark. No, it was a damn megalodon.
Gotta love those.
Yes, this sumbitch breached the water right underneath my ice patch. And he told me, he said, roll. So I rolled.
Oh no.
Nat 1.
Oh.
His exact words was, you're swallowed by the megalodon.
So you were straight up Samuel Jackson, Deep Blue Sea then.
Yes.
I got ate by a shark,
shark.
motherfucker.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And but he told me later, he goes, I want you to know that if you had hit a nat 20, he said, oh, you would have made it and it would have looked awesome.
Aw.
And then the second one was the same campaign. I played my favorite race in all of D&D, a Luxodon.
Yeah.
I love the
Yeah.
Luxodon.
Now, for those that don't know what the Luxodon on, you want to include us in?
The Luxodon are a elephant race that live within Ravnica, which, if you know, our magic players and stuff like that out there is a book out there called The Guilds of Ravnica. They brought magic, ironically enough, they brought
Into the world of D&D.
into the world of D&D.
Which it only makes sense.
It
Yeah.
does.
Yeah.
Well, it just added a shit ton more of races. But Luxodon are my favorite. They're big elephant people, like elephant humanoids, just like your owl people, your
Yeah.
lizards. He was a paladin. He had the oath of conquest.
He didn't have the Luxodon Warhammer?
I did actually.
Okay.
Yeah,
I was gonna say, just
I
magic,
actually
he has
did.
to have the Luxodon.
Yes,
for it.
I actually. So that the hammer was handed down by him to a father. He was a prince who. It was a generic trope. He was a prince, kind of like Aragon, or
Okay,
Aragorn.
yep.
Aragorn got rid of. He said, "Nope, don't want this. I'm gonna wander the world and do good." Happened along these travelers were fighting a beholder. He didn't even mean to either. Brandon legit did not mean to kill my character. He says, "You got hit by the ray of the beholder." I was like,
Oh no.
"Oh."
Ow.
He goes,
Ouch.
he goes, "You're turned to dust." And I just went, "Okay." And like, what are you gonna do? You got hit by the ray of the beholder. Like,
I'm like, okay, well, I guess I'll roll again.
yeah. He looked right at me and goes, "You might as well just roll up a new character."
Dang. I remember one of my stories. I remember, speaking of just in general, like water creatures and things like that. I played in a live-action role-play LARP known as Trials of Terra Nova. And essentially the whole background of that is you're a bunch of explorers in a caravan that is basically exploring the new world, because that's what Terra Nova means.
Right.
And I played a legitimate businessman. The class was actually known as Pirate.
Of course.
Shock.
Legitimate businessman.
And, I had a custom pirate costume made and all this stuff, and I had, like, Nerf gun flintlocks that they literally sell at Cracker Barrel for $10, by the way. They look great. They actually do pretty good as far as firing. You can change out the pins and all that. But anyway, one of my side stories was I had to basically get this curse lifted. And essentially it's kind of a Jack Sparrow type thing where, like, the curse was I was allowed to live, but at some point I'm going to have to give back to Davy Jones, essentially.
Ah.
And so I decided along my travels with my friends that just wasn't going to fly, because I actually enjoyed playing with them and I didn't want to see anything come to issues with them. Yeah, to an end with them.
Right.
So I went out to the lake, as one would do, trying to claim Excalibur. But
Sure.
I went out to the lake and I prayed to one of my gods at the time in the game to basically give me some type of insight and all this stuff, and essentially they turned on me.
Right.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh no.
So that kicked up, and this was actually really cool too in the actual story. This legitimately happens. It started to rain while I was in this lake. Like, it wasn't a very deep lake, but I literally was just knee deep in this lake, and it started raining as soon as I literally finished the incantation to pray to the god or whatever. And it started raining, and my DM took advantage of it, and he said, "Okay, turn around." So I turned around, and my vision basically had changed. My companions essentially became their inner demons, essentially.
Oh.
And what that basically ended up happening is that sent me basically into like a psychotic thing, because here I am thinking these guys are great. No, according to the vision, it was just like they were just out for blood and everything else. So I attempted to kill essentially the house leader.
Oh wow.
It's in what was weird about it too is actually because of the quote unquote dream, I guess, I got a boost in my weaponry and all that stuff. So when I'm firing Nerf flintlocks, instead of doing 8 points of damage, I'm doing 32.
Wow.
So essentially, it went from a flintlock to a knuckle buster. And,
That's a straight hand cannon.
yeah, basically.
You got a mini blunderbuss in your hands at that point.
At that point, it was like a one-shot kill, and it was designed to be that way.
Right.
But on the outside, what the other players got to experience is they looked like I was the psycho.
Uh-oh.
Nothing was going on in their world. Like, everything was fine, But from what I saw, was that. So I was put on a trial the same day and all this stuff. And then essentially what they ended up doing is they did a magic spell, and they were able to basically get into my mind and see that I was manipulated. So we went out to later in that night. They forgave me and all that, but they were cautious.
Mm-hmm.
And we went out to the forest, and one of the deities came down. It started raining again.
Oh no.
Literally started raining. It was like humid weather, and then all of a sudden just downpour. It cooled down. It was that spooky paranormal feeling of lightning in the air.
Did this have the fog effect behind
there
it?
was no fog.
No.
Okay.
I was
That's
really
surprising.
hoping. Yeah, I was really hoping for it, but no. Like, it legit rained. There was a little bit of lightning, but you could feel the static in the air, and it made you feel uncomfortable.
Right.
As I came around the corner, here was one of the NPCs dressed as the deity. Well, first off, this NPC is actually scary as fuck in real life.
No.
I believe.
She's a very good actress, and so she got everybody basically into the scene. And I remember saying that, hey, I know you guys don't believe what happened and all this. I know you're cautious of me, but I need you all to go back and get out of here. this girl is not here for me. And so they were just like, oh, whatever, and all this stuff. And I remember yelling just at the top of my lungs to the point where it sounded like thunder. Go.
That's amazing.
That's cool.
I said, go.
You
It's-
just gave the doctor goosebumps.
Yeah, it was incredible, and it set the scene. They literally all ran off. They didn't know what to do, and that was the death of, well, first death of Captain Thaddeus Kirby.
A lot of death.
Yeah, it was. Well, so in that LARP, you actually have life gifts.
Right.
So essentially, you could die once and get away with it as long as somebody brought you back, like a medic or whatever.
Right.
The second time, you're like dead. But this was basically a mark from the gods and the deity that, hey, don't try that shit with us again.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So just, incredible little stories and things like that.
When the gods and the DM get together, and if they want somebody dead, they're dead. End of story.
Oh, yeah. Well, and then it doesn't help that, when the actual scenery around you interacts to what's actually going on.
I would like to have been there with a video camera.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds
All
cool.
that in.
Oh,
you
it
know.
was epic.
We could have won an award for that just that one scene.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I mean, that's actually what dove into me telling stories as a DM, is I took that experience and brought it to the table. Now, because of what I experienced, I smelled real rain. I experienced real rain and things like that. And so, you've all played in my Star Wars game.
Yep.
Yeah.
I put you guys through Kashyyyk, and
Yes.
you smelled wood. You smelled the water. You got the sound effects of the LAT gunships going down. You got the radio chatter. I made you close your eyes. You guys were in the scene. That's the experience that I got.
When I was playing in your campaign, it was almost like to say, okay, I'm getting transmissions from SEAL Team 6.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was like, okay, they're after Bin Laden. Hot
Yeah.
damn.
Yeah.
And if I'm not mistaken, some of the clips you played were from one of the computer games that me and you both play. Didn't you actually provide some of the voicing for some of that?
Yeah, so if you guys have ever played Republic Commando, essentially in the beginning of the game, there is some clone trooper chatter, basically because they just dropped on Geonosis for the first time.
Right.
And so everybody's like freaking out, like, they're over here and blah, 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 doing that kind of stuff. And that's what I brought to let you guys listen to, because it was so much chatter, you couldn't really tell.
Yeah.
But it was enough to get you in the mode, you know what I mean?
Speaking of rain and clone troopers and DMing, one of the things that I always try to avoid as a DM is the stereotypical, you meet in a tavern, there's a mysterious man in the corner who is hella shady, but not really, but hella shady and not really. Go talk to him, please. As a DM, I've tried to avoid that so hard, and I think one of my crowning achievements was when I had all of you literally born into my game.
Oh,
yeah.
When-
That was awesome.
When in my Clone Wars game, which I used Force and Destiny for, or the Force and Destiny system for, I had them actually in the cloning pods, like in the cloning vats, and I gave like this speech. I put on like some bubble sound effects. I had lighting on the ceiling that looked like water as it was going around. And I remember Redemus, he was staring up the whole time, even though I told you to close your eyes.
we were supposed to close our eyes and all this, but I'm just so taken back of just like, oh my God, PTSD. Like,
This is the best trip.
yeah, it was a crowning moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially like that's something that I like about RPGs and role playing is I like cinematics.
Well, so I gave this whole speech about them opening their eyes for the first time and looking around,
It
and
was
then
awesome.
them seeing each other in the pods, but they recognized, oh, that's family, even though they looked like them. And then finally, I ended with the decantation and then waking up in the barracks, and that was. I honestly think that was one of my best moments as a DM, or at least the best opening. I hope I can top that with Transformers, but I don't think I will.
To be frank with you about that story, to me, it was almost like Shades of Akira meets Shades of Star Wars all at the same time.
Yeah.
Because when you can actually say, oh, you meet at a bar, and it ranks right up there with a very bad novel. It began on a rainy and stormy night or wherever that was.
Yeah.
There's not much creativity to that. But, when you can think of a way in order to introduce characters into your story, something that's fresh, something original, that's the jet fuel that propels everything else. So
So many times when I've started a session as a DM, I've myself been like, how do you want to meet? And everybody's like, what? Yeah, no, this isn't your daddy's D&D. This is, how do you want to meet? Well, I'm okay. You're walking down the road. Fine. Awesome. There you go. You're walking down the road and all of a sudden, boom, you bump into this dude who just tried to steal your wallet or your coin purse, or like you were saying, Star Queen, just the generic, you walk into a tavern. Hey, shady guy. I'm going to go talk to that guy. It's so boring.
I want to be in a cave jerking off furiously and some guy walks in.
Yeah, exactly.
Goes, oh my god, and runs out, and then he says, I'm telling mother, and then you run after him, and then you meet your party, and that, congrats, you're on an adventure, go kill Tiamat.
Yeah. And I think that's something us three or us four as DMs can really relate to, because trying to, your very first session, not character creation, but your very first session is where you get your people invested in the game. So if you do some generic opening like you were talking about, Star Queen, most people go, okay, yeah. And that kind of sets the tone for the rest of your campaign. If it's a generic, crappy opening, you're probably going to have a generic game. So you really need to draw, just like in a book.
Yep.
Your forward or your first chapter, the first, what would you say, Redamus, 2-3 pages?
I would say your first 2-3 pages. I mean, your first 1,000 words is what sets the tone for the rest of what you're going to experience.
It's your hook.
Yeah.
That's actually one of the rules for actually buying fiction books is if you're not sure if you're going to like something or not, crack it open, read the first page. If you don't like the first page, probably you're not going to like the rest of the book.
Yeah, you can never judge a book by its cover.
Well, I do, but that's just me.
But yeah, I think all the DMs out there that are new DMs, I think the best advice all four of us can give them is be original, be yourself, and really think about how you as a player and a DM would want the story to go.
Also, get weird. Get weird.
Yes.
As Star Queen just demonstrated.
But also, too, if you are a player who wants to be a dungeon master, who wants to be a storyteller, who wants to explore further to all that, the first roll, you're going to be tense, you're going to be nervous. Yes, that's normally what happens. But go slow.
Mm-hmm.
To be honest with you, dungeon mastering and storytelling is kind of like sex. You totally forget what happened because it's over in less than, 5 minutes for the first time?
You last 5 minutes?
You get sex.
Have you heard his voice? Yes, he does.
Anyway, but eventually once you become more comfortable with yourself, you become more comfortable with your stories, and then you become comfortable with other people.
Yep.
And then you begin to gain the confidence from that. You know, it doesn't just happen overnight. It takes time.
And that's when you can get into the weird stuff. And that is when you can get more memorable moments as well.
Oh, God.
Absolutely. Well, and I think this is a good little tidbit thing for, let's say the players have anxiety.
Yeah.
When you want to get past that, the best way I would recommend is jump into a game.
Yeah.
Try something new, get weird.
Yes.
Step out of the comfort zone. And, it's easy to say, hey, I could stay in the comfort zone and just not do anything. But it's something that I always tell everyone else is you'll never know unless you try.
Yep.
Well, and, I got to give it to Redamus. He's not lying. It was your campaign. When we started, I tried to play the big brute that I'm used to playing. And you're like, no, play something different. Play something that you've never done before. And I come up with Asajj. Mm-hmm. And there are days where I regret killing him, but he was a fantastic character. And if it wasn't for your advice, and Lovecraft and Star Queen said the exact same thing, if it wasn't for you guys, I would never got out of my comfort zone. And now as a DM, I know how all the classes work, where it used to be just mages and barbarians. I now know how rogues and rangers and everything work.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of it. And again, you won't know until you try.
Yeah.
It's all trial and error, and that's the beauty of it. A very famous Japanese quote is, fall 7 times, get up 8. That even applies to role-playing games. It applies to life. It applies to everything. You will never get to that self-satisfaction or success until you have experienced the failures first. And that's what a lot of people, they think failure is a negative thing.
But it's a teaching tool.
It's a teaching tool. It's actually a very positive thing to fail.
We also have, just even as players, everyone is going to have something, they're either going to have a cringy character at first, or it's going to be a version of themselves but better, or some variation of the two. Even my very first character ever was who I kind of call Proto Liliana at this point. I don't want to say she was a total try-hard, but looking back, yes, there was total try-hard moments. Pretty much I'm the protagonist of this story elements, and I could see where other players would get frustrated or felt like their toes were getting stepped on, or feel like they wanted to not just come into my territory, like in terms of lore space, because they didn't feel comfortable or like I was occupying that. But everyone is going to have that character, and you do get better as you go on. Even nowadays, one of the things that turned me off of D&D at the start was all the math, because I don't know about anyone else here, but I hate math. So yeah.
Yeah, even though, I'm a scientist, I hate math.
And that's fair. As a storyteller, I also hate math, which is also another reason why I like Star Wars, because it's just based on storytelling.
Well, right, and even the dice in Star Wars as well. I really like that system. A lot of people still prefer Star Wars Galaxies, which, okay, I can understand. It's something familiar that you can apply to 5e. However, I really do like the versatility that the narrative dice can give you.
Yeah, narrative dice are extremely beautiful when it comes to, if you just want to drive a story, you want to drive the scene and all that other stuff, it adds more to your playability instead of just saying, okay, well, I'm going to do an acrobatic to try to land on this dragon. Okay, you roll and let's say, I don't know, for instance, you get a 15. Okay, you did it. And again, other DMs can take that any way they want. They can add to it, they can do less with it. Or the essential thing, what I'm coming from is, in the games that I've played, it's literally just down to the dice. Did you do it? Okay, cool. Okay, now what? But with narrative dice, there are drawbacks, there are advantages, there are successes, there are failures.
Absolute success.
Absolutes, absolute failures, despair, and those kind of things. Those different elements add to the game. And that's also the other beautiful thing about Star Wars is you can also have the player's DM as well.
It's a descriptor.
It's a descriptor. So if they roll, for instance, they roll 3 green die, which are a success, and they roll 3 purples, let's say they get 1 success and 2 purples. So the thing that I usually use to describe how to play the game is, as a player, you're in this hallway, you're in a firefight, you're getting shot at and all this. When you roll the successful but you get the failure, is you're basically at this point, okay, you're scared. But you still get your shot off. Now the thing is, you don't hit the target. You accidentally, because you're scared and you're just kind of cold firing, you shoot out the light above them. Well, now that light is now electrocuting them or something, or it's creating an issue for their attack pattern. So now you've changed the game.
Again, Remus, in your campaign when we were on Kashyyyk, I rolled and Hassaj stuck a droid in the wall.
Yep.
But you're like, you rolled a disadvantage. The disadvantage is your pike is stuck on the wall now because you did it with such. Remember that, such ferocity. You're like, yeah, it's stuck. Good luck.
Yep.
Yeah, but also, to be fair, I equate role-playing games like cereal.
Okay. Elaborate.
Okay, I want to hear this.
Now,
I'm intrigued.
Now, this is interesting. You have rocky gravel cereal, like grape nuts,
Okay.
Okay.
to almost liquid diet. Role-playing games are no different.
That's true.
You have Rollmaster, perfect example, dating back into the early 1980s, where one simple roll could get you through multiple charts, multiple screens, and endless math. And then there's another system down that other spectrum is Fate. And it's so liquid. It is so fluid. There's almost little to no rolling. There's either a plus or a minus, and that's it. And it almost sounds exactly the same with what Star Wars is, with advantages, disadvantages, etc. When people have an understanding about role-playing games, some people are very intimidated, like what you told me, Star Queen, that people are intimidated with math.
Mm-hmm.
And that's fine. It is not meant to having a bludgeon to understand how the math works. Sometimes people will take a simple math idea and just use that for their calculations about hit and damage, constitution saves, or whatever saves is there.
I've played, from 3E to 5E in D&D, and I love it. But when you introduced me to the Star Wars Galaxy game, the Force and Destiny, I was a little apprehensive. I'm not gonna lie, because I was like, I've seen. You handed me the character sheet. You said
It's definitely different than a D&D.
Oh yeah.
Well, we had to sit down, and I think it took us about 2 hours to build a character. And
It does, yeah.
But the depth that you get to go in, this character could be in a spitting image of who you are if you want it to be, or it can be
The complete opposite.
a complete opposite.
Yeah.
My favorite thing is the narrative dice gives you a chance to, like you said, have those awesome cinematic moments, but know that if you mess up, you're gonna mess up. There is no in between.
Transformers actually is very unique in the sense it's kind of a hybrid of the D20 system and the Star Wars narrative dice, because in the book that I'm using, there's a table and each gives a number that basically you have to beat in order for you to succeed. So for example, like 1 to 3, that would be hard, or not hard, easy. If you can roll above that, congratulations, you're in the clear, you did whatever you wanted to do. And then when you get to the upper echelons of like 18, 20, that's when you better have the stats, otherwise you are not making that call. So it's kind of an interesting hybrid of the system. I've honestly just thought about using the narrative dice just for easier, like, kind of story-wise, and also considering what Transformers is as well. Most of the time, you're robots, you're gonna hit each other, so you might as well just have things play out narratively as opposed to, well, okay, I do this plus this plus this, and now I have this.
Yeah.
I have a shocking admission, though. When I first read about the current Star Wars system that is currently published by Fantasy Flight Games, I didn't like it.
A lot of people didn't.
No, a lot of people's knee-jerk reaction was they didn't like it.
Because I always went back to the West End Games D6.
Yeah, which, and a lot of people
know.
still use.
Yeah.
Which, from that point of view, you actually got a lot of the things that Age of Rebellion, Edge of the Empire, Force and Destiny misses. Is you get a lot of those extra classes. Mandalorians get a lot more things. A lot of people are, again, they're used to rolling dice.
Yeah, like me.
Yeah, and that's okay too. But that's the beauty of it, though, with a bunch of different games. So, for instance, let's go back to Vampire for a minute. What is Mind's Eye Theater's version of, like, combat, for instance?
If you taken apart the entire plethora of combat concerning Vampire the Masquerade and separate that from Mind's Eye Theater, it's apples and oranges different.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. With Sit Down, it's very simple. With LARP, we're talking a scenario that would take normally back in the past, back in the day, would take about 2 or 3 hours, and that's for one scene for combat, because each player has to take a separate turn. Those who have celerity go first, and that also depends on how high your celerity rating is.
And that's like in Magic, where it's you're going off of spells go on the stack.
Oh yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so a lot of people, you can kind of relate to that if you do play Magic. It's a lot of things that are on your character sheet, for instance, do matter as far as like what you're able to do, when they're able to do it. It's counter things like that. And
Now, an interesting fact, I remember back in the day, we had to cancel an entire Vampire game simply because of an entire fight scene that took roughly 7 hours.
Oh, God.
Wow.
tell us the story.
Yeah, I want to know this
Yeah.
story now. How does a fight drag on for 7 hours?
Okay, long story short, this was a Camarilla versus Sabbat war.
Okay.
The old rules were just clunky at best, to put it mildly, because everyone had to have their turn. And we're talking about 30 players.
Oh, God.
So a lot of people, wow.
That's a lot of turns.
Yeah. And there was the storyteller and 6 or 7 narrators trying to cater at least 80 players in one city.
And that's pretty stereotypical with LARPs in general, is you have a larger amount of people out in the forest or out at a house, those
Yeah.
kind of things, because those people are actually all able to interact with each other. You have players that are playing actual NPCs, you have players that are playing PCs.
And bear this in mind, some of the players themselves were actually either cheating
Yeah, that is also another issue in LARPs for sure.
or unfortunately one person pretty much was not a popular player at the time.
Oh no.
And that's unfortunate.
Yeah, and they
That
got
has
picked on.
happened.
That dawns a question. Have you guys ever played in a game or DM'd a game or even seen one from the outside where maybe a particular player wasn't favored like the rest were and you really wanted to be like, hey, why is he getting, you know what I mean? Like, why is he getting treated any different?
We've seen that happen a lot.
Multiple times.
Yeah.
Are there any of those moments that like really stick out where you wanted to like where you eventually openly said, why is this person not getting the same treatment we are?
Yeah, and that goes actually back to LARP itself. We do a lot of like live cooking and things like that for, our patrons and everybody that's playing. And one of the things that the big draw for it is, so if you come to the LARP and you offer to be an NPC, you do not have to pay the cover charges, which is typically for a whole entire weekend. That included, you paid $40. That include room and board, include, a place to shower, it gave you food throughout the whole entire weekend. But NPCs got to go for free
Right.
because they're the cannon fodder. They're literally there to go way down the forest for hours upon end for adventurers to come out there. They're the ones that are doing all the role playing for the bad guys and all that kind of stuff. Well, one player in particular was a straight vegetarian, and a player that I used to go do the LARP with absolutely refused to cook for vegetarians. Well, first off, that's just silly, because if you like cooking and all that kind of stuff, you would think that would be a challenge. Or
I want to cook vegetarian.
I want to
once.
try something different.
Yeah.
Like, it's not that hard to cook for vegetarians. Well, this person in particular ended up stopped coming because they weren't getting any food, but they were getting treated essentially like actual cannon fodder, because one, they didn't have to pay. Two, the food typically came out of our own pockets. It didn't come from the game. We chose to bring that to the game because it's just another level of the experience. Is you got to sit there and sing songs and shanties and eat and drink and be merry.
Mm-hmm.
Well, unfortunately, that player just didn't have anything to eat.
That sucks.
Yeah, it's awful. I mean, that's something that basically I had to kick that chef out, and I took over their standpoint in order to basically be able to cook. So going forward, then we actually ended up getting a lot more vegetarians, which was totally fine. Because, as a good cook, you can feed anybody.
Yeah. What is the purpose of role-playing games? By and large, to have fun.
Yeah.
Exactly.
To live in the world of make-believe.
Yep.
That's all it is. When you alienate people just because they're this or they are that, you just rob somebody of their fun.
Yeah.
I mean, that is beyond wrong.
I was playing a cleric. I noticed one of the other players was getting picked on by the DM in the party quite a bit. Like, it got to the point of it wasn't even it was just straight harassment. And we were playing, and he ended up going down. You guys have seen me play. When I play a character like that, I want to help everybody. Everybody gets fair treatment. So I ran over to this player. I was going to take my turn to bring him back. And the DM's like, all right, go ahead and do I did lay a hands on him. I rolled my D20 to see if it worked. And he goes, oh, all of a sudden a deity comes down from the sky and denies you your power.
What?
Yeah. He pulled like a literal god card on me. So I turned around and said, what deity? Well, it just so happened to be Ogma, who my character was
Sworn to.
I said, so you're telling me my own deity come down and told me I couldn't do that? Stumped the DM. He goes, I said, I think I'm going to do it. And me and that player actually got up and left after that.
Yeah, there was a. I've actually done post by play role plays for nearly 10 years now, and there was an incident. No, so in post by play role plays, there's not really a DM. There's just like an admin and a moderator because it's all on like a forum, right? And there was an instance where two people who had male characters wanted to go on a date with each other. Okay, cute. Everyone was into it. They went out on their date, and there was one player who I swore had like some sort of blood feud with one of the players, because every single time this person tried to interact with another character, immediately they were in and like, oh, well, I need to talk to you. I need to do this. I need to do that. Meh. And at that point, we all said, no, these characters are on a date. This didn't happen. Which I also have to ask, have any of you guys had to do that as well, where someone has said, oh, I do this, and then as a DM, you have to take a step back and say, no, that didn't happen. Has anyone had that experience?
Oh, yeah.
Everyone's pointing at Lovecraft there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that happened at the end of Hasaj.
Yeah.
Again, it's one of those things where the doc wanted his character to be extinguished, and I gave that opportunity. And I thought, okay, well, this person wants to learn how to play. I'll let them sit in as an NPC. They can help me kind of, move the story a little bit. Well, that person decided that ad-libbing was a really good choice.
Oh, no.
And decided to basically off Hasaj, or attempt to, at that time. And I just straight up said, no, that didn't happen at all. Completely shut that down. The thing is about MMOs, RPGs, LARPs, tabletop role-playing, any of that stuff. The point is, you are including everyone that wants to experience your story.
Yes.
You want the best for every single one of your players. Because, again, the world is too negative as it is, okay? People want to step out of their boundaries. People want to leave reality to experience something different.
Experience something else.
Right.
Yeah. Nobody wants to sit there and listen to coworkers complain about their work, or listen to their bosses complain about their work. There's a bunch of shit going on with, the Olympics, for instance. Without going into detail with any of all that, you guys can all look that up.
Yeah.
That's not the point. The point is you want to experience the high ground. You want to experience something that's better.
You want to experience a story is what you want.
You want a story.
You also want to be the hero of that
Exactly.
story.
Yeah, don't become the villain, please.
How many times have, like you said, the stuff with, I'm not going to go into detail, the stuff with Blizzard, the stuff with the Olympics, all this is evil that's happening in our world. How many times have we wanted to be the superhero that flies in and saves the day?
Well, exactly.
LARP, RPG, you mentioned, MMORPG, stuff like that allows us to be that hero. And essentially, it reminds us that, well, my favorite, thing, Lord of the Rings. A hobbit took the ring to Mordor. It reminds us that even the smallest of person can change the world in a big way.
In a big way, exactly. And, again, that's beautiful writing from J.R.R. Tolkien.
I love
Things
Tolkien.
like that. He's so nice. What a nice guy.
I mean, not all games have to end happy. There have been games where I've been in before where they did not end happily.
No.
But at that point,
No.
if you can't end things happy, I try to end things in a meaningful way. So that way sacrifices were worth it.
Well, that's different. The player feels like they actually accomplished something.
And even though it's tragic what happened, the story is complete. Everyone walks away feeling
At the end of the day,
complete.
when you walk away and you say, wow, what a story.
Yes, that.
You see, truth be told, ever since man came out of the primordial soup and we began to walk on two legs, what was the very first form of entertainment when we sat around the campfire?
Storytelling.
Exactly. We created myths, we created legends, we created gods, we created religions, we created human civilizations all across the planet and hopefully beyond this world.
Because let's face it, back then even the world was complete shit, so we needed something to get by.
Hey, Ugg got 8 today. Oh, that's bad. But it was badass though. Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, hey Ma, look at this chomp right across my chest. Anyway.
Why do we have cave drawings? Why do we have stories
Yeah.
in marble?
And something else I also think that games like this, RPG, LARP, and stuff does is I was watching a video today, and it really brought up a good point, and I think it was just funny that we're going to do this episode today. And then this I seen this video. In all the movies, you always see that one person make the huge sacrifice. One person steps in front of the bullet or takes on the bad guy by himself. He always dies though, right? How does he know what he did made a difference? How does the hero know that his death saved the person that he was trying to save?
Well, that's the issue.
It's not an issue. You know what it is? It's faith. He knew that his actions could turn the world better.
Exactly.
So he did it. And that is another thing I think people feel when they play games like this is what I did. Hisage dying, for instance. I know we keep talking about it, but Hisage dying, Hisage saved the group. He died, but he saved the group.
I have a question for this panel. Mm-hmm. Has anyone ever read The Hero of a Thousand Faces?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
no.
yeah.
William Campbell was one of the teachers of George Lucas when he was creating the entire Star Wars saga. And he was dealing with classical archetypes that has been haunting humanity ever since the very beginning. Because these stories are supposed to remind us that we're all heroes, only if we choose to be.
Exactly. It's also one of those things where it turns into, if you're getting to the point where you literally have lived long enough to become the villain because, well, and it dead serious. I mean, like it was probably one of the best lines in that whole entire thing. You know, you either die a hero or live long enough to become the villain. That's because in storytelling verse, I guess we'll put it that way, you become the villain because, again, everything is so negative all the time.
Yeah.
You see the negativity. Let's look at, like, just real quick, really fast. Dr. Doom clearly knows the world is screwed. And it took a whole entire space wolf to basically say, well, shit, yeah, you were right. Okay, I guess you're not the bad guy. You know, he became the bad guy because he saw the problems. And that's what creates, and this is this thing I always talk about is, you know, what creates a good villain is a great good guy or a good girl.
Yeah.
Because they don't think like villains.
True.
Well, I also think one thing that makes just a good character in general and is fascinating seeing the dichotomy of two characters of how one becomes a villain and how one becomes a hero as well.
Yeah.
For example, Optimus Prime and Megatron. One was a gladiator in the pits or in the mines, like, one of them was a slave, the other was a librarian. You see kind of where they would have things in common in wanting things to get better. However, you also see where they diverged as well.
Yeah, and is Megatron actually a bad guy during the G1 arc? Because, again, he was in the pits. He sees the issues that were going on, and that's why he led the Decepticons the way they are. But that's actually one of those things. We could go on for hours about Transformers. That storyline is so good. On any story, yeah. So I wanted to go ahead and wrap it up. If anybody has any quick story things else they wanted to include.
How about that time I rolled the D20 through those doors?
Oh,
yeah, that was awesome.
That was a great story,
that
too.
was genius.
Yep. I am Ceresa Strange, the daughter of Doctor Strange. Get away from me.
Boom, D20 through the doors of the little, that was Warforge, or Dwarven Forge, yeah.
Yep.
And people heard us all the way into the street.
Yes, they did.
And
That was an epic moment.
It was an absolutely epic moment, especially when you make that dice roll and get that natural 20.
Yeah, and that's, I think, it was a nat
It was a
20.
nat-
It was a
20,
nat
yeah.
20, yep. Eldritch Blast fucking murdered 2 people.
3.
Yeah.
3 people,
It
yeah,
was
that was
3.
right. The DM of that gave me an extra one for cool points.
Yeah.
Also,
I do remember that.
DMs have cool points. If your players do something epic, have cool points.
Yeah. Again, that's something that, Star Wars does. We give boost die for epicness.
Yes.
Well, you did it for Hisage. We were in the beginning of the game. Everybody lined up in front of the door. It was your idea, Starqueen.
Yes.
Somebody said, Hisage, blow us through the door. So he just built up and force pushed everyone through the door. And all of a sudden, this group of guys or people bust in and just killed everybody in there.
Yep. So, yeah, we have so much epicness we could keep adding to it. Now, we have a bunch of epic stories. What I would like to hear is your guys' epic story. At the beginning of the episode, we gave you kind of a different little scenario thing going on. We would like to know, what would you do?
Indeed, what would you do?
Are
You
you
don't-
the hero? Are you the villain of your own story? You know, what's a game story that you have for us? Make sure to share that with us at 8bitsdicerolls@gmail.com.
Yes, indeed.
You don't know what's in that chest. It could not even be a chest. It could be something different.
That's true. Or,
A
you know,
mimic.
was it actually the Force? Was it a dark power? Or
Was it the
something?
wind?
Was it the wind? Did somebody
Was-
fart?
Was it a cave even?
Yeah, was it a cave? Let
What
us
is
know-
life?
Yeah. Let us know what kind of things you experience within the world of LARP, D&D, role-playing, RPGs, and all that kind of stuff. And of course, as if we didn't talk about the Force enough, next time we are going to be talking Star Wars.
Oh, hell yeah. The Star Wars retrospective.
Yes, this is going to be an interesting episode. But thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in this week. You guys have all been awesome. I hope you enjoyed our fun little stories. And so just remember, for the next time, put that coin in the slot. Make sure to hit that power button. Roll for initiative. And we'll see you next week.